Good afternoon. My name is Tiffany Osborne, and I'm a shareholder here at Anderson Kill. We're going to move on to our next panel, which is the state of the market, the broker's perspective. Today, we're going to hear from this dynamic group of brokers about the state of the market regarding underwriting, renewals, claims trends, and hot topics. We are pleased to welcome Cabot Lyman, a partner in the Gillen Partners North American property team. With over a decade of experience, she specializes in structuring and placing large, complex property risks, taking a deeply collaborative approach with clients and their in-house legal teams. Her deep market knowledge and creative approach are instrumental in helping clients navigate volatility and achieving their strategic goals. Next, we have Larry Fine, and the Management and Liability Coverage Leader for Willis Tower Watson's Finance North America Division. He has over 30 years of experience relating to D&O liability, professional liability, employment practices liability, and fiduciary liability. Prior to coming to Willis, Larry worked at 2 law firms and at a major insurance company where he helped write all of their financial lines policies and endorsements, which are still in use today. With this depth of experience, Larry is a leader at Willis and in the D&O and fiduciary space. And finally, we have Mark Vitale-Hearn, who's an Assistant Vice President of Property and Casualty at USI Insurance Services with 2 decades of experience spanning finance and insurance. He specializes in designing risk management programs for manufacturers and distributors navigating complex global supply chains. Leveraging his background in oil and gas and operational finance, Mark implements innovative strategies to help clients build resilient, growth-focused models. And we will reserve some time at the end for questions. So we will start off asking the brokers some questions about their role and how it's emerged in the recent year or years. So my first question for you is, has the role of the insurance broker or client's expectations of this role changed within the last year or so? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think that a broker's role is constantly changing and developing. I think it has to for our clients, right? I think one obvious way right now is with technology. I would say that our clients are expecting a lot more data and analytics from their brokers than they have in the past. So that's something that we've had to adapt to. I would say for our clients, it's crucial to make sure that you're partnering with a broker that's investing in technology and proactive about technology. One example, as we were just talking about AI in the previous panel, is that we at McGill have partnered with Google to develop Google Earth AI to be able to provide that greater level of CAT modeling, mapping, forecasting, recovery for our clients.
I think generally, Mike's working. I think generally it's become less get me a policy and more big picture strategic advising and consulting. Looking at things holistically, return on investment from different policies and how much is the right amount of insurance in all different categories. Also, just giving more information on what's going on in the markets, what's going on with claim trends, all these things that we do sort of more in a big picture way than I think historically maybe we did. I guess I'll stick with that because I'm sure I'll elaborate as we go.
Absolutely. I definitely see that clients are looking for a strategic partner in their operations, someone that has a wealth of knowledge within the industry itself, not just placing coverage or just saying, well, you need an inland, you need this and that, but also understanding what the reaction that their policy is going to have to their operations. Bringing in analytics for benchmarking across the industry and the recent placement of coverages and maybe some challenges that similar businesses are having within the industry would be really helpful for them to understand why they're getting the coverage that they're receiving, maybe some exclusions, and also the premiums that they're expecting.
And following up on that, what are some of the specific services that brokers are providing to risk managers and general counsel these days?
I feel like we have more responsibility to really keep clients updated on all sorts of things. We do different market updates, we publish articles and stuff. I just wrote an article about mandatory arbitration, by the way, which came up before. Look for that. We do things, updates to the market, about claim trends, things like that. We do like webinars, all that. Richard Kettle readily available, and then when emails, blasts and things to clients about a big decision that just came out, a big legislative change, stuff like that. I feel like we have sort of more of an obligation to really be involved year round, not just at renewal, to give updates and important information for our clients.
Yeah, and I would say too, I feel like on the property side in particular, our role has changed a little bit, or our services, in the sense that we now have a greater obligation to go out and get the capacity that the clients need that might not be available in the standard market. So, for example, you're seeing a trend of creating a lot more facilities, and whether that's additional capacity to what you're already placing in London, or if it's a facility for something that really just didn't exist in the marketplace before, we are trying to do that for our clients now. An example of that was we had a book of bourbon business, and apparently nobody wants to insure bourbon. So, and on the property side, sort of what goes along with that. And so, from all their standard, typical markets, typical property policy, we couldn't get coverage. So what we did at McGill is that they created a facility on our _ digital trading platform, where they went out to Lloyd's, they got the capacity, they created a facility specifically for bourbon insurance, property insurance, and really created a solution for our clients where it was lacking in the marketplace before.
Okay, and to look at the other side of things, what are some of the changes or regarding information that policyholders should be providing to you?
I think we look to find out if there have been material changes in the risk profile, if they're changing their business model in any way, if there's potential M&A situations coming up, significant changes in leadership or the board of directors. Of course, any known litigation or anticipated litigation. And for E&O coverage, it's important to periodically check the definitions of professional services and make sure that any of the newer areas that the company's going into will still fit into that those descriptions, which hopefully are wrong.
Yeah, I would just say on the property side, it's crucial, right, to keep your broker involved with any acquisitions and divestitures you're going to have, any change in exposures, any new locations you're looking to move into. Something that has been more recent, but we've been happy to see, is that we feel like real estate investment teams have gotten their risk management teams more involved in their processes and actually reaching out to them and reaching out to us as their broker to see how a potential new acquisition would impact their property portfolio from an insurance perspective and the cost. I think also that really anytime you might have a claim, we talked about this a little bit before as well, but I think that clients are often waiting to report a claim to the market, but really if there's any event that you have that may lead to a claim, maybe you feel strongly that it's going to be under your deductible, get your broker and your claims team at your brokerage involved from the beginning, just so we can help you prepare in the event that it does lead to a claim.
I think there's a good discussion in the last panel about notices, when to give notice, and I think there's sort of a consensus that if you have a claim, give notice. If you have a potential claim, it's much trickier. And I think it depends partly on what the market's doing, right? So, if just like in the D&O, there's over 50 companies writing D&O, I think you have to worry as much in the current cycle about giving notice, and that's going to be your rates go through the roof, whereas there's been harder markets we have to worry more about that. So notice is good.
I would definitely say, in the supply chain world, if in the event that you're going to trade shows, exhibitions where you're taking on maybe new vendors, distributors, maybe you change your 3PL, taking on more inventory, you definitely need to reach out to your broker to advise them that there's new limits that need to be implemented within your policy, maybe new loss valuations, so that we can be able to respond properly to any losses that occur throughout the supply chain, and any maybe new developments that may be available as far as products that can be endorsed onto your policy that can be able to respond.
Okay, that was great. So moving on generally to the state of the market, what key developments or trends have defined your respective markets in the last year?
Yeah, again, start with property. So anyone in the property world knows that in 2025 we've seen a softer property market, which is great. market stabilization, but that really came off of 6 years of a hard market that really kicked off with Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and Maria in 2017, 18. So then after that, we basically saw 6 years of a hard market. So there was room, once the market finally softened, to have some significant rate decreases and pricing come down due to capacity and stable reinsurance. Hopefully, clients have been partnering with their brokers to take advantage of that market and improve their terms and conditions. I would say that this is an opportunity to get rid of some of those non-concurrencies or tougher restrictions that you had that were put on there during the harder market. And then also captive utilization. We can talk more about captives if anyone's interested, but a lot of our clients set up captives or use their captives more during the hard market just because premiums got so high, so they were looking to retain some of that internally. So again, I think a big trend that we've seen has been, continuing to figure out the best way to utilize those captives and what makes sense to pay in premiums to the markets versus retain yourselves.
Absolutely. As you said, property casualty has recalibrated. We're looking at some volatility as far as within the supply chain, obviously, whether it be issues like with Unify, with having a direct loss that occurred, wiping out a lot of issues with Whole Foods as their main supplier with Unify. A lot of issues that may be occurring within the supply chain that need to be addressed besides AI. Would be just tightening restrictions within carriers, looking for more transparency from insureds as far as what their operations truly are. Just simply saying that you provide a product that may be industry or non-industry specific isn't necessarily going to get you the best coverage or premium, especially.
In D&O and financial lines, generally we've seen all these things go through cycles. So after there's a long soft period, a short hard period, followed by another soft period. So lately, though, we've seen things tending more towards flat renewals. It's been getting harder to get reductions, but we've taken advantage of that to get better terms. Like most carriers have been fairly open to improve terms. That's the direction we've been moving. Meanwhile, since 2020, there are over 20 new D&O market entrants. That's definitely helped with creating the overabundance of capacity and the premiums going down. But then in the past 12 months, we've seen a little bit pulling back. We saw Argo and Markel in the U.S. have pulled out, and now we're seeing the transaction with Everest and AIG, which is just increasing competition a little bit now. So while we're seeing mostly flat premiums now, there are a few factors that could lead premiums to slightly start to go up in 2026.
And some of you touched on this in your last response, but what are some of the top insurance risks in your respective areas right now? I know Mark had mentioned AI, but what are some of the other ones?
People definitely focus a lot, talk a lot about cyber and AI, but those things right now in the D&O space especially aren't creating really new and novel exposures. If you have a greenwashing case or something that's just a variation on the historic, you exaggerated how good your company's doing. With cyber, we've actually done research about the correlation between big cyber incidents and D&O claims that follow. There's a very high correlation. If you have a big cyber incident, you're going to probably have a D&O claim. The thing about D&O is that everything can be a D&O claim. If something bad happens to a company, the follow-on effect is that if the stock goes down noticeably, you can get a securities class action. If you have, fines or penalties or other things that result from it, or if people die, that can be a big derivative claim, even if there's no stock movement. So we see a big cyber incident where the company has a lot of expenses, maybe pays some penalties. That can be a big securities claim and derivative claim. So, people focus on those things. And meanwhile, like the SolarWinds case led to a big focus on who's an officer. Right? So we saw insurance getting very nervous about that because the CISO for SolarWinds was targeted specifically. So it's become common now that we get clarification CISOs are considered to be officers. We've come up with some broader endorsements to cover other with developing titles, because in today's world, not everyone's just a C-suite, you know, a CEO, CFO. There's a lot of other high-level positions where it's not as clear. We also see companies with international subsidiaries. We've got a lot of questions in the last year where they, you know, people serving on international subsidiaries, boards and as officers, they're concerned about whether they have coverage on the parent company policy or if there's a local admitted policy. So those issues are coming up in connection with the risks, and we're addressing those.
As it relates to cyber, it's interesting with property because, you know, about 10 years ago, they very much got separated. So they felt like, you know, a cyber event should fall to your cyber policy, not affect the property policy. But now there's been a lot of questions on what if a cyber event leads to physical damage, right? If the sprinklers go off or whatever it may be, you know, which policy should it trigger? So that's definitely a hot topic for us right now. Cat risks for sure, of course, right? We've seen, you know, just the number of events increase in terms of hurricanes, wildfires, convective storms, tornadoes in places we're not expecting them, you name it. So that's always a risk. I think a big thing on the property side has also been the risk of underinsurance just because of valuations. A lot of our clients have been looking closely at their valuations because the replacement costs of things have gotten so expensive and gone up so much year after year because of the increase in construction costs, the delay in supply chain. It will take that much longer to replace that piece of machinery, tariffs, things like that. Those are definitely constant risks for us right now. Just geopolitical risks, economic slowdown. I would say the list goes on.
And can you identify some new or novel client requests from the last year or so?
I guess I jumped ahead. Am I a covered officer? That's coming up a lot. Yeah, I guess that was my answer to that question.
Yeah, I would touch on the property side. I wouldn't say that there's a ton of new products, but as I touched on before, finding new facilities, finding new ways to get capacity, that's definitely been a big theme. And then, alternative risk solutions, including things like parametric policies. Again, a parametric policy is something that's an event-based trigger policy. So essentially, if that event gets triggered in any way, maybe it's a certain wind speed for a hurricane or something very calculated, then you will get a payout and can get paid between 7 to 10 days after the event happens. So if you're a company that really relies on that cash to get back up and running after an event and can't wait 6 months for your physical damage to be assessed and to go through, an entire claims process, a parametric solution can be really valuable for you. Because we've seen reductions in premiums on the all risk side this year because of a softer market, we've been encouraging our clients, if they can, to maybe take some of that premium savings and invest it into things like engineering and these parametric policies.
I think parametric policies are sort of hot these days and have a lot of potential benefits. But so we saw last year, a company came out with a parametric policy that was triggered by a stock drop. And automatic limit. We got kind of excited. It's very creative and we really like creativity, but some people were saying, could you use that like a premium infill, but the coverages were just too different. And there's also a requirement that the stock would drop by a certain percentage that might, and staying, that's the way parametrics work. You have to have specific standards, but it didn't quite make it. I think that type of creativity is exciting and useful in the field.
Yeah, I mean, on the property.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, sure.
The parametric nature of those contracts, are they insurance or not? So, because on the one hand, if a contract pays off if the wind speed is 125 miles an hour, then you don't have to have loss. You just have to have the event. And normally in insurance, the first principle is I have an insurable interest. Right. So how is it that it's insurance and not just a gambling contract?
So that's why the securities one, you have to have the drop and the loss. But I don't know about all the others.
On the property side, you do have to have the damage as well. So like you said, you can't just be reclaiming the funds and not have any damage. But instead of going through the process of 6 months to see how much damage you actually had, it'll pay out the amount if you can say we suffered this physical or business interruption loss. And that's why the limits are usually smaller as well. So you're not going to get a payout of $100 million. It's usually $10 million, $15 million, something like that you can know right away that you have suffered that amount of a loss and you need to recoup quickly.
Yes, there probably would be issues with that you couldn't overinsure.
Yes.
I would say on the supply chain side, there's actually products available and developed for cargo cyber, where in a typical cyber policy, if you are getting social engineering included in that, that'd really be more for your receivables, where on the cargo cyber side, that would be if in the event that there was a situation where that actor were to trick you into relinquishing any product that you may have, and you may have coverage for that up to a certain limit, of course.
Okay, that's a good transition to talking about brokers and how your role has changed in the last year with respect to helping clients select the correct policies. So what are some key issues regarding your role in your specific industries helping policyholders select policies?
I guess the bread and butter is still getting people policies. Right? But so in discussing that, though, there's a lot to talk about. So, of course, a lot of beleaguered risk managers, are definitely focused on price, because that's what's going to get them in trouble if they're out of budget. But that's definitely not the only thing. Far from, we talk about terms at the end of the day. Obviously, very important. You won't be surprised that your most dreaded losses are covered. Within terms, retentions are very important. We see a lot of negotiation on that front, where the coverage attaches. But then the claims experience and claims paid reputation of an insurer, very important. And that's the information that a broker can really impart. So we keep track on a periodic basis and also in real time. Who's doing good stuff, who's doing bad stuff. And the policy's not worth anything, they're not going to pay. So we impart our experiences about the different carrier options. And so, the carrier that pays, and is a good partner is worth a little more money than carriers that have to sue, that have to hire Anderson kill more. So we're very focused on that.
And what are some insurance products? Oh, sorry. What are some insurance products that deserve a closer look?
I would definitely say receivables or credit insurance. It would be definitely a pivotal point to look into. With the tariffs, a lot of my manufacturers are looking as this is the end of their business. They're going to have to close shop. But realistically, if that's not your perspective and you can align with some of the raw material distributors that you work with, suppliers, this may be a great point for you to look into maybe insuring your receivables with some of your current clients, increasing those amounts and looking at some growth down the line where you may be able to take over some of the other clients that you may, or competitors that you may have in the industry.
I think some areas that are still developing and deserve to develop more, I think, are first of all, wage and hourly. That's been around for a while now, but it still hasn't really taken off as much as I would have thought, and I think it's still growing slowly. We see entity investigation coverage being endorsed on D&O policies. It's more available, better terms, and less expensive than it used to be, so we're encouraging clients to think about it again, anew. Also, I personally think there's various intellectual property policies out there that a lot of companies don't really know about or look into, and both defense and coverage for affirmative actions that I think should be considered more regularly.
And we'll move on. I'm sorry.
I have a question. It kind of relates to the past 3 questions, and it's for everybody. But a minute ago, we were talking about selecting an insurance company and policy. And the factors that you would look at and, the responsiveness of the insurance company versus the premium. And sort of what I always wonder is, I see, certain policies after the fact, typically when there has been a denial or a reservation of rights. But generally, I guess, part one of my question is, are there very significant differences between, lines of insurance being sold by different insurance companies? So will a D&O policy, sold by insurance company A, the primary, have very different terms or conditions or coverages than insurance company B? Or from year to year, as forms are tinkered with and changed, do most insurance companies sort of edit and amend together? I'm just interested. That's sort of question one. And then I guess my follow-up question would be, how hard is it really to get the endorsement or the change in the language to a policy? So Larry was talking about who constitutes an executive under a D&O policy. And I have seen some where it's the CEO, the CFO, and others where they are expanded to include, after SolarWinds, the chief technology officer, maybe even the risk manager. And so, not all policies are the same, and I'm wondering, is that true from the get-go, or is it because of negotiation that has taken place through the brokers?
That was a lot of stuff, and I lost it. So I want to answer your middle question first. I forgot what your middle question is about.
I'm sorry, I'm very passionate.
Yeah, right. Well, I say so. In terms of who's an executive, you have competing interests because you mostly want a lot of people to be covered, although you could go too far. Like I see the policy that says all employees have full coverage, but you might have a low-level rogue employee that you don't want to have full coverage. So, first of all, we actually had an article in the D&O Diary a week or two ago, because we've gotten buy-in from a couple of companies, but we're working on getting more, and this was to get the concept out there that what we think makes the most sense is to have anyone that the company treats like an officer should be treated like an officer by the insurer. So whether there's either something in writing in advance saying that person's entitled to indemnification, or after the fact, the GC says this person just got sued is the type of person we want to indemnify, so then the insurers should follow it. So we have endorsements that do that type of thing, and we'd like to see getting that from more companies. But the question of who's an executive can be, that's also relevant too. Like notice when you have to go to the insurer because they know about it. So you want the definition of officer to be pretty broad, or for it not to make a difference, because most public company D&O policies cover employees if they get sued in a securities case, or if they get sued with a person who's a covered officer. So there really wasn't a huge gap there, but we want to cover people. But we want the definition of executive for purposes of notice requirements to be narrow. Right? So we like to see, like the CFO and GC maybe only. We actually don't like to see the CEO in there, although companies really like to put it in. But a CEO really might not know about every situation that's brewing. And so those are different inquiries. Who gets full coverage of a policy and who starts the clock ticking for notice to the company. I think you had one other question. Anyway.
I think one of your questions was about how difficult is it to make changes to the policy and to get those endorsements on there. So from a property perspective, some of our large shared and layered programs can have 50 insurance companies on it. It's not necessarily going to be layered like some other lines. You could have 10 insurance companies all sharing the primary, so it can get very complicated. So our biggest recommendation is to work closely with your broker who has a good broker manuscript form, and that can be tailored and bespoke for you as the client, which is key. And essentially we get all of the insurance companies to agree to our policy. So in that case, it's much easier to get endorsements signed to, added to that or changes made than if it was being led by a carrier form. We also always recommend that because we want your manuscript form, your policy to be dictated by you and your broker versus the market, because we can personalize it to you. So again, I would just say to make sure you're working closely with your broker to come up with a broad manuscript form.
And we have a few different policies in different areas that we get insurers to sign up for, that they're going to write those terms. But on your question about how it works across the insurer, generally, in my experience, you have an area like financial lines, you have the same people involved in creating the policies and endorsements, and there tends to be a philosophy across the board, with some carriers preferring more specificity and others seeming to somehow prefer ambiguity despite the risks. But I think so within property or other parts of the company, they'll have their own people making the policy. They're not probably consulting each other about their overall philosophies.
I would say on the supply chain side, it really benefits working with a broker that has a strong relationship with underwriters that look into cargo, global supply chain, things of that nature that really can write a great policy. Some of the things that you can do where like inland ocean marine are uniformly written for the most part, but there are opportunities where you can request, let's say, a no loss bonus at the end of the policy if there are no claims, or profit sharing opportunities. And it would really be a broker that really understands those type of nuances on those policies to be able to request those things and have that relationship with the underwriter to be able to implement that.
All right. And now following up, had a nice transition to underwriting trends. What are some things that insurance companies want to see these days in underwriting? Some new and novel things.
So underwriters read the papers, they get excited about fuzzy topics. So I think when you have an underwriting meeting now, they're gonna say, "What's up with your AI? Do you have ESG policies? Do you have DEI policies?" Those are still very hot topics. Although the reason they're asking those questions has changed. So there was a time when they say, "Do you have ESG policies?" Great. Now they say, "Do you have ESG policies?" And they make it nervous. So companies now have to worry about changing dynamics of federal regulation in the way that may conflict with your state regulations. So I think it's harder for companies and insurers to know what answers they want. But so on AI, I think the answer that they want is that you have good AI, but you're not talking about it too much. But basically, underwriters ask certain questions, they check the box, and there are only a few carriers where the underwriters really fully understand why they're asking the questions.
And Larry, to follow up with you on that, what are some of the trends regarding the actual financial lines coverages?
Well, so we kind of said that we're moving towards flat premium renewals while we're trying to get better terms with some success. I think carriers have been on a trend for the last few years of preferring to write like lower limits, not get too put too much down on one risk. So, a carrier that might have done a lot of 20s a few years ago would now rather do 10s. Some would rather do 5. That does make more work for the broker when they may have to a ton of layers. It can be more work for the broker claims people when they have to corral twice as many insurers to go to mediation, get a case settled. I think that's one of the bigger changes. And just generally, we like to coordinate a lot between underwriting and claims. We like to see carriers where we feel there's a good line of communication between underwriting and claims. Whenever we meet with the carrier, they tell us how great the communication is between their underwriters and the claims people. Some carriers have claims and underwriting people in different buildings, different cities and stuff, and it's not very convincing, but at the end of the day, we test it all the time. If we have a big dispute, we're going to go up the chain of claims, making reasoned arguments, and then, as necessary, talk to the underwriters and and how maybe they'll be talking to each other.
Yeah, I think that's key on the property side too. I think that the better relationship you have with your insurance partners and your broker and your claims team within that broker, the more likely you are to have a claim paid. So it's crucial to keep everybody informed early on. Something that we really try to promote is to actually bring our claims team to client meetings, to renewal strategy meetings, to meetings with markets, so that they're getting to know the client and their exposures and the insurance partners early before there's an event.
And circling back on the topic of trends, is there anything unexpected that we've seen specifically relating to renewals?
I would say right now, speaking to the downstate market, things are a little bit tough in New York City, especially for, let's say, commercial auto insurance. Many carriers have restricted, being able to offer that coverage. They're moving away from that, where there's so many limited markets. Now those markets are now inundated with providing renewals, providing new quotes. So you can expect maybe a last minute quote or renewal from them that you may just have to buy at that point. One thing to possibly help in doing so, I would say, is maybe even, getting a lot of those documents, details prepared ahead of time, if possible, with the insured.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, based on timing, how far in advance should the renewal process really be started at this point?
Ideally, I would say a minimum 90 to 120 days ahead of time, gathering documents, new information. I think it's, especially in the current market with valuation of the loss, we need to know what the hard costs are. If there's any possibility that we can maybe, again, negotiate, especially on a cargo policy, if there's any potential for profits, where I have some partners that I work with that allow even as much as 100% of whatever the amount may be that you're getting in profits. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. So, so it would be beneficial to come out at least maybe 90 to 120 days prior to your renewal in order to gather as many documents that's needed, maybe new information that may have occurred, even be able to have the opportunity to negotiate further and give you the opportunity to review what we have and maybe go back to the carrier with those thoughts that you may have or concerns as far as with the terms that were received.
So if you're thinking of your marketing and possibly switching the primary carrier on the program, we've been finding it particularly important to really beat the bushes with the client about whether they might have a claim that they haven't reported yet for a potential claim that might be advantageous to report now. We've had experiences where you switch to another primary carrier, and then we find out the first time that there was a claim last year. And if you're with the same carrier, you have a less heavy lift than if you have a brand new carrier that you presented with a hurting building. So raises the stakes quite a bit.
I would say that doesn't even have to stay within your line of insurance. I think it's important to be informing your brokers on your greater relationships with insurance partners and what's going on, maybe even on other lines, because that can help us with our negotiations and have these carriers look at your risk on a holistic basis. A lot of these carriers are probably rating 3 or 4 or 5 or more lines for you. So we will try to leverage lines against other lines. If you have an open claim going on with one, that's helpful for us to know on the property side and vice versa.
I'm a believer in having many lines with one broker. Some companies like to spread the wealth. I think it makes the risk management job a little easier if the broker has a view across many coverages. First of all, helps prevent any gaps in coverage between different policies, but also they understand your relationship with different carriers.
I would even say for certain programs right now, especially for downstate New York, for a carrier, certain carriers to even quote let's say a commercial auto insurance policy, they're going to want to look at maybe another policy that may not be subject to any claims. Let's say maybe a workers' compensation policy or a general liability, some other policies that they would need to look at prior to even giving a monoline quote. And some of them are not offering monoline whatsoever at this time.
Also, a lot of carriers sort of associate D&O and fiduciary, and sometimes you can get better terms on fiduciary if you also have a D&O policy to title, so it helps for your broker to have both things in their hands.
Okay, we'll pivot to, we touched on claims, but we'll focus on it a bit more. So what are some claim trends that you've seen in the last year that are the most troublesome for policyholders?
You have the general one, social engineering, supply chain interruption, property claims, climate issues, you name them.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues is just the cost of the claims going up so much. I'm sure you all find that, more and more counsels being brought in, C-suite is getting involved just because the cost of the claims have gotten so high, especially on the property side. We talked about that a little bit in the D&O panel, but again, whatever information you can share with your broker and insurance partners ahead of time, the more likely they are to feel comfortable with their risk and pay the claim.
So D&O claims tend to be kind of consistent from year to year, usually more than 200 through the class actions, give or take a few. But so I don't know how many of you do anything related to fiduciary, but fiduciary is more volatile. So issues related to benefit plans, especially defined contribution pension plans, that's been pretty volatile. In the last year, there have been a bunch of new types of fiduciary class actions involving plan forfeitures, tobacco surcharges, healthy mortality tables. So that's it's made the fiduciary insurer very nervous. We managed to hold the line on premiums, but that's really threatening to go. Those premiums are threatening to go up because of the new volume in some of these new types of cases. Plaintiffs are really just filing against companies indiscriminately because they don't do a lot of investigation before they file, and the dismissal rates are not as high as they are on the D&O side. That's been an issue.
And Kevin, you touched on the cost of the claim. Would you say it's easier or harder to claim paid these days in the last 2 to 3 years or so?
It's hard to generalize. I think it very much depends on maybe me. I think it's definitely going to depend on the claim and the situation. I think that, some people like to say that in a softer market, it's harder to get claims paid. But again, I think it comes back to the relationships that you have with your insurance companies and your brokers, how comfortable they are with your risk. I think where we've seen the claims not getting paid is when the claim is due to an exposure that the insurance company didn't even know a client had, right? It might be a location that was newly acquired but was never reported to the insurance company, or a supply chain or a third-party distributor that was never disclosed to the insurance company. So again, I just can't reiterate enough how important it is to share the information with your insurance company so that they feel comfortable with your risk.
I would also say one thing to note is the broker itself. The broker you're working with in the firm, what support systems are in place? Are they doing facility walkthroughs initially when they're taking you on? Are they providing any support as far as fleet maintenance, safety controls, any PPE quotes as far as what the cost would be to implement those things? What is your broker actually bringing besides, again, the quotes and maybe some expertise? But those non-insurance products, I think, are really critical right now.
I think it's harder to get claims paid.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving on to our next portion, we're going to talk about some hot topics from the broker's perspective. Our first topic will be artificial intelligence, or AI. So this question is for you, Larry. Have you seen a lot of new policy exclusions due to AI?
In public company D&O, none. Private company D&O, some. Because private company D&O has broader entity coverage. We saw one carrier with a really broad absolute AI exclusion. We rejected. I assume every broker rejected. I think that's dead. But overall, like I was saying before, I think AI is just sort of, in many ways, on the financial line side, just another variation of things that can go wrong in the company that can lead indirectly to D&O claims. I think we're seeing a lot of other changes that are causing buffeting companies back and forth, worrying insurers, such as besides, like I mentioned, changing positions on DEI and ESG. Also, there's the tariffs. So I think on the D&O front, companies really have to be concerned that they're making really excellent disclosures about current issues and potential future issues caused by tariffs, which includes definitely supply chain issues, a lot of other things. And so I think insurers are and should be concerned about the quality of tariff-related disclosures. So I think that's a hot topic.
And earlier you mentioned class actions in your space. Do you foresee any sort of AI-related class actions regarding D&O financial lines?
Yeah, so I guess that has been kind of indirectly said. So far, almost all the class actions have been this AI washing, which is just a variation on your saying things about your company that are too exaggerated. I think we will start to see more cases that say, your AI just didn't work at all, or your AI injured people, or your AI broke the law, and things like that. And so even though there aren't AI exclusions in many of these policies, there are now some AI-specific policies available, both primary policies and sort of umbrella, wraparound type policies. For the most part, I don't think they're so necessary, but they have some advantages because, for one thing, they cover European penalties arising from AI regulations, which I think most regular policies don't affirmatively cover, so that can be worth looking at. And so, on the class action front, so far on D&O, it's still mainly in the AI washing, but I think it will expand.
Okay, Larry, I have some follow-up questions for you, or the transitional questions regarding cyber risk. Can you provide some insight on the intersection of D&O and cyber risk?
Yes, I showed about the steps we made in an article about if you have a cyber incident that costs more than X millions of dollars, the chance that in a given year a company's going to have a securities claim goes out from the usual 4 or 5% for a company in the United States, so like 35%. So it's a pretty big correlation. So I think it's important to look at your cyber and D&O policy together, make sure there's no gaps. Cyber policies are very broad coverage, but they usually have securities exclusions. D&O policies may have some level of cyber exclusions, although if they do, they need to have a carve-out for securities claims arising from the situation. And you need to work those together. But of course, on the cyber side, there's a lot of other risks to worry about. And I talked to one of our cyber people, found that you need to worry about things beyond just insurance. Of course, analytic quantification, predictive general terrorism are very skittish about social engineering. So those are also developing things in a little bit of back and forth negotiation with the carriers.
Okay, and another hot topic is supply chain risk. So, Mark, what are your clients in the supply chain industry most worried about?
Typical ones that we mentioned previously, so geopolitical tensions, issues with tariffs, navigating sanctions brought on by the U.S. to certain areas, whether it be Belarus, Africa, Venezuela. Maybe if inventory is being sourced out of there, they may need to find a new supplier because those particular items cannot be insured. It's specifically stated. Other things to consider: cyber attacks. You have AWS, you have CrowdStrike. There's a number of other ones where you would need to have some type of protection yourselves for cyber, whether it be a cyber policy or just also supporting it with a cargo cyber policy would be very effective. Even vendor insolvency, which I touched on previously. A lot of vendors right now just don't know how they're going to be able to continue operating with these tariffs and the cost, and whether their U.S. partners are willing to pay those costs, or if they're pivoting to someone else, maybe a less quality product available in the market just to show face.
And another hot topic are climate and weather-related risks or loss. Cabot, I'll direct this at you. Which climate-related risks are your clients most concerned about?
Yeah, there's a lot. I would say that, hurricanes, flooding, wildfires, a lot of things that we've seen more recently. I spoke about those kind of what we consider secondary perils a little bit before, which are things like tornadoes, convective storm, hailstorms, winter storms, things that are not as easy to model and price. That's been a challenge for underwriters because you just don't know when they're going to happen, where they're going to happen. We're seeing tornadoes in Massachusetts nowadays, and it's just very, very difficult for the underwriters to actually model and price them appropriately for the premiums.
And as a follow-up, what are some of these risks that clients assume are covered but maybe are not?
I wouldn't say that they're not being covered. I think the biggest issue that we've found with clients is clients not understanding the coverage that they have or how much they're responsible for retaining in one of these events. So a hurricane is a great example because a client might think I have a $100,000 deductible, but actually in the event of a named storm in Florida, they might have a 5% deductible. And a 5% deductible can mean that it can either be 5% of the per unit of insurance or it can be 5% of the entire total value at that location, which if that's a large location, you could be on the hook for $20 million in the event of a hurricane. And often our clients, maybe have not communicated that properly to their boss or the CFO. In this event of a loss, they're now having to, go internally and say, we owe $20 million. So I would say it's not that things aren't getting covered, it's just clients being aware and communicating how much they could possibly be responsible for retaining.
Just to add to that, I think in some situations, depending on the carrier, there are opportunities where you'll need to really dive in deep into the language of the policy to really understand what it is that they're offering. In some aspects, they may be offering maybe vague language on the policy or just silent, uncertain subjects. Getting out of supply chain into like construction, I know action over is a big topic right now in downstate New York, where more than likely will not receive any bids at this time if you don't have an action over policy. In some situations where it may not be stated, I would definitely encourage a broker or any marketer to just flat out ask the underwriter, is this included or are you just being silent on this?
We're nearing the last few minutes of our program, but now that we've learned about trends and a little bit about hot topics from your respective industries, what is the one takeaway that you have for policyholders from what we've learned in 2025? Moving forward.
I think value your broker, communicate with them often, make sure that you're giving them the opportunity to help you, in every way possible to look at things holistically, prevent any gaps, know what's going on in the litigation world, regulatory world that affects you and your specific business. Ideally, have many lines with very few brokers so that they can have that big picture, and that way you'll be best equipped for things changing because of a 1-year policy, during that year, a lot can happen, a lot can change, and so you're really planning ahead for a relatively long horizon, and you need all the help you can get.
Yeah, I would say that proactive risk management is really the most important and the best thing that you can do. I would say that if you don't already have one, you should have business continuity plans and plans in place. That can include when to bring in counsel, right? But having business continuity plan that you can communicate to the market and to your insurers is the best way that you're going to mitigate losses. I would say to partner with a broker who's representing you properly in the market and communicating to the market everything that you're doing to prevent these risks and provide information. And just, in property in particular, the market is volatile and it's cyclical. So keep those relationships in mind and work on the relationships that you have with your insurance partners.
I would absolutely say to ensure you're aligned with a insurance specialist that is maybe a subject matter expert within your industry, has opportunities to align themselves with certain programs that may not be readily available to maybe a generalist in-house, maybe building a reputation for working in supply chain, working in maybe unique risks like perishables or aerospace, where they have that underwriter's ear and then create numerous other underwriters where they know that they're safe with putting business with you, and also that you're presenting a good narrative for the client that, you know, these are what the potentials of claims are. There is no potential for claims, in that we're partners aligned between the insured, the carrier, the underwriter. We all have each other's best interests at heart, and making sure that this client can actually grow over some maybe volatile markets.
Well, and help us to present you in the best light.
Thank you.
Tell us the good stuff you're doing. We'll try to draw some more out of you and why you are at better risk than your competitors.
Thank you. So now we have just a few minutes if we have any questions from the audience. Okay, so let's give the brokers a round of applause. This is a very informative